What all of us need, but no one can afford: a vacation. Cheers. As always, got another reaction video I want to share with you guys, talking a little bit about how, more specifically, millennials and Gen Zers are affording to take a vacation, with especially how crazy we know this economy is and how expensive everything is. So, videos from CNBC, let's dive into it. And for the drink of choice, as I almost forgot, nice cold beverage, no alcohol today. I got a nice run for me later on today, so we got a Celsius peach mango green tea. It's one of my favorites. This one and lemon lime are probably my top two, but this one, I'd say lemon lime's favorite. This one's a close second.
The average vacation cost for one person in the United States is a little under $2,000 per week.
More than a third of summer vacationers, 36%, are willing to take on debt this summer for their travels. The reason that...
Not no, but hell no. Come on, guys, we know better than that. You never take on debt to go on a trip. Oh my gosh. Let's just keep watching.
What's worrisome is because the average credit card charges over 20%, which is close to a record high. I don't want...
Let's think about that for a second, because I think a lot of people don't understand this. And I think that, that actually I think is a little low. I may be wrong. This is literally me talking out of my you-know-what. I would say they're upwards more towards like 26, 27%, but again, I could be wrong. Let's say 20%, make it even numbers. Think about this for a second. The fact that you guys would take a vacation and pay 20% interest for a trip. Now, don't get me wrong. I love vacations. I love trips. I love traveling. It's the best thing I feel like anyone can do. But you gotta be able to afford it. And we'll talk about how later on in the video.
I tell people they can't have any fun, but this represents a lot of people taking on expensive debt.
Also, quick note here, I'm not talking to the people that are travel hacking or credit card hacking. That's something completely different. I'm talking about people who are truly going into debt and then making interest payments on those debts to travel.
And this is the kind of thing that can linger.
Globally, 72% of millennials and 65% of Gen Zs said they plan on spending more on leisure travel in 2024 compared to 2023.
Oh, okay. I thought they were going to say something crazy. Yeah, I feel like that's definitely fair. I feel like the millennial and Gen Z generations tend to favor traveling more over, the generations of Gen X and baby boomers. So I'm not shocked to see those numbers. And my wife and I, we're millennials, and we would love to travel more this year. But we'll have to wait and see how everything goes.
In the U.S., 47% of millennials and 42% of Gen Zs said they plan to take on debt to go on summer vacation.
There are so many compelling reasons why people choose to take on debt to have these vacations. If your kids are dreaming of going to Disney World, and there's no way the family could ever really swing it without going into debt, it could be a memory the family will have forever. Parents often can rationalize spending in these terms for their children.
Here's how Americans are...
All right. Woo, this was a doozy right now. I'm going to be interested to see what your all's comments are with my opinions on this. But first, as a guy who's been to Disney, I would never in my wildest dreams go into debt to go to Disney. Hell no. Hell no. Just sitting and baking in the heat and standing in lines and running over people with your strollers. No way I'd be sitting there pushing the stroller being like, oh shit, I went into debt for this. No way, I wouldn't do it. I would not do it. I would never go into debt for vacation. As much as I love to travel, I would never take on debt for a trip. But some of you may be like, oh, well, how do you afford it? I save up for it. I save up for the trip. I budget. My wife and I budget our money, and we plan accordingly on how we're going to spend our money every single month so we can afford trips and not have to pay debt for it. Now, if that means we can only take one trip this year or can't take any or whatever it may be, well, then so be it. We're adults. If we want to go take on some overtime or, create some more content or whatever it may be to try and earn a couple more dollars to take a trip, well, then we do that. But these are the conversations you have to figure out. Like, you can't just be like, oh, I really want to go on this trip. Okay, let's charge it to the credit card. Screw it, I'll pay it off later. It's the worst thing you can do, guys. All you're doing is setting yourself back even further to not be able to take any more trips. Think about planning your money accordingly, handling your finances like an adult, so then later on in life, you can choose to take trips whenever you want. That sounds nice. And people who get to that point aren't putting trips to Disney World on the credit card and never paying it off and making interest payments towards it. No way, never.
Swing it without going into debt. It could be a memory the family will have forever.
Something else about that, I know I'm talking a lot in this video and this one's probably going to be long, but it's fine. The fact that I'm all about making family memories, but you can make just as great of family memories without going to Disney and going into debt by doing something completely different, closer, not as expensive.
Parents often can rationalize spending in these terms for their children.
Here's how Americans are paying for their summer vacations. Credit cards are the most common way people pay for their vacations. 62% of Americans surveyed said they put at least some of their trip on a credit card. Financial experts say that this can be a risky move if the borrower cannot pay the balance in time to not be charged interest.
That's what I was saying earlier. If you're credit card hacking, like my wife and I put everything, almost everything that we spend in a month, we put it on our credit card. And we do that because I use the Fidelity credit card and I earn like cash back basically that gets deposited into my brokerage account with Fidelity, and it buys me shares of index funds. Like that's what it does in stocks. So I'm using my money from my credit card to buy investments, while some people use their points to travel. It's whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter how you do it, but that's what I mean by like credit card hacking. You can hack credit cards to use them to earn points, but never pay the interest on them by paying off the credit card loan in full or the credit card balance in full before the payment is due. We do it every month. Been doing that since 2014.
The average credit card balance is already over $6,000, according to TransUnion. If you add $1,000 in vacation expenses to that, maybe it feels like a drop in the bucket, but it just makes it that much harder. That's $6,200. If you make minimum payments at the average interest rate of 20.7%, you're going to be in debt for 18 years and you're going to pay more than $9,000 in interest. So some of this is making a bad situation worse.
The debt, it feels like this trade-off for a lot of people. It's ultimately the interchange between money for these lifelong memories and seminal experiences. And that's a sacrifice many are not only willing to make, but feel so strongly in doing so. Especially when debt is a weight many people are already accustomed to carrying.
Consumers are still out.
Guys, let me tell you this. There is a way you can enjoy your life without having to stay in debt. Plain and simple. And it starts with a very basic budget.
They're using their credit cards. Their credit card balances are over $1 trillion now. We're seeing actual delinquencies on credit now rising. People are dipping into their savings. But bottom line is that they're still spending.
Not all credit card users are paying.
Guys, I know I'm pausing a lot. I'm going to let this play, but this is a deep video. This is so much further than just taking a vacation with your credit card debt. I'm scared for a lot of you out there. And I know there's one of you watching right now. And, some of the things I'm saying may sting a little bit. I get it. I've had people say things to me that I'm doing that I know I shouldn't be doing, but then they call it out loud, and I'm like, oh, that hurts, but I know they're right. I know there's somebody watching this right now who's thinking that. And I get it. I may come off as a little bit arrogant on how I say some of this stuff, but it's so true. Like, it is. Like, deep down, guys, I'm doing this because, one, for entertainment, and I love making YouTube videos, but I genuinely care about all of you guys and your finances. The main reason I started my YouTube channel back in 2018, I've said this plenty of times, is because all I wanted to do was to help spread awareness on financial literacy and to help people better themselves with money. I talked to my friends about it, my parents, my family friends, everybody. I was just I was a freaking nerd consuming all this financial content, and I wanted to spread the knowledge that I had with people because I grew up seeing how everyone lived their life. I figured out that, like, it's not even a secret. Like, I just know the way that you should live financially. It's like a guy who, goes from being 300 pounds to being a jacked dude in the gym, and, he's pumping the iron, has six-pack abs. Like, it's not a secret. He just followed what he was supposed to do. And I'm just sharing that knowledge. I want you guys to know that there is a better way. To that person that's watching that I mentioned, there is a better way to do it. And it's not that hard. It takes a little bit of sacrifice, it does. But once you get into the swing of things and get used to it and get used to that lifestyle, I'm telling you, it's stress-free, stress-free. You never worry about, you worry about money, but you're not worried about money in the sense of like, oh my God, I'm going bankrupt, or how am I going to afford to pay my bills? You're more worried about, okay, what are some things I have coming up to make sure I plan accordingly?
Interest. 43% of Americans said they used their credit cards to pay for their trips, but paid it off in full to avoid interest. This also comes with the perk of accumulating rewards points.
Use those rewards points and miles. Put those to use. But it doesn't make sense to pay 20% interest just to get 2 or 3 or 4% cash back or airline miles.
In order to avoid interest while still having more time to pay off the credit card balance, some vacationers choose to open a new credit card that provides them with 0% interest for a set period of time.
The risk here is that once the term expires, the rate goes way up.
Another option vacationers are considering is taking out a loan for their trip. 5% of vacationers plan to take out a personal loan from a financial institution, which typically carries a lower interest rate than credit cards. The average interest rate of a personal loan in June 2024 was about 12%. 6% of those surveyed said they plan to borrow from friends or family.
I think both of those represent a slippery slope. Personal loan rates have gone up a lot.
That debt equals irresponsible is so pejorative and such a simplistic way of looking at this, that there's all different reasons and rationales why we might intentionally go into debt. People don't think taking out a mortgage for a home and making this a lifelong investment is irresponsible, but it can be a really bad investment in a lot of cases. So you have to consider, where is it important for you to invest your money? And maybe it is this trip with these lifelong memories with your family that you'll never get back.
So she made a point about saying, some people will say going to buy a home could be a bad investment versus maybe putting travel on a credit card, and having debt sitting on the credit card and not paying it off right away is not as bad. My opinion is, yes, people can make bad choices buying homes depending on how they're choosing to buy it. Meaning, if they go and purchase a home that is way above their, how much they can technically afford. Generally, if you have a mortgage payment that's roughly around 25%, I've heard some people say you can go up to like 33% of your take-home pay. That's a relatively safe amount that you can, get by on and not be too risky of a purchase. But I would say generally, if we look at historical figures and how real estate prices have risen over the past hundreds and hundreds of years, generally real estate deems to be a much better investment versus a trip. Now we're also looking at two massive ends of the spectrum. One is a lot larger of a purchase than maybe a trip. So those are some things to think about as well. But I would also argue that your shelter, your home, your place to live is a little bit more important than a vacation. But again, it's all about the buying part whenever you purchase a property. Meaning, what I mean by that is whenever you make the purchase, when you do the deal, you need to make sure you're making a solid deal with yourself and your personal finances. So I get what she's saying. I really do. I understand how she's saying some people are buying extravagant homes when they really can't afford to. And I'm saying both of them are probably wrong. If you can't afford a house and you're not buying a house that's going to fit into your budget accordingly, you probably also shouldn't be going into the debt for a vacation as well.
Loaning money to yourself out of a 401k account. A loan is different from a 401k withdrawal. Withdrawals have different rules and tax implications. Loans are not permitted from IRA or IRA-based plans. The reason someone may go this route is instead of paying interest to a financial institution, they would pay themselves back over time with interest. That payment will go back into their retirement account and eventually accumulate compound interest.
Just never borrow from your 401k ever. Never do it. Always have an emergency fund in place in cash that's liquid that you can get access to within 24 hours. I look at my retirement accounts, mine and my wife's, and I just basically look at it as that money I will not touch until I'm 59 and a half. I will never touch it, ever. Not doing it. You guys shouldn't either.
Borrowing from your retirement plan definitely worries me because really the biggest predictor of future returns is time in the market. So even though we don't know what stocks are going to do this week or this month or this year, over the long haul, they've been massive wealth builders. So I feel like that would be more of a last resort if there's kind of an emergency. Going on vacation is not an emergency. It is interesting how, while you could say on one hand that it's worrisome that credit card balances are near record highs and the personal saving rate is near a record low, this is powering a lot of economic growth. But what's good for the economy is not always good for your household finances.
Consumer spending makes up nearly 70% of U.S. GDP, which means a rise in consumer spending can spur economic growth. But a rise in consumer debt can lead to a hard pullback in spending, which can cause what's called deflation.
Deflation is just generally associated with not just recessions, but deep recessions in the economy.
A recession occurs when there's, quote, a significant decline in economic activity that is spread across the economy and lasts more than a few months.
So being in this line of work, well, I mean, making content on YouTube doesn't really give me any sort of skill whatsoever. But being, I guess, involved in understanding the financial realm and looking into things, first off, no one can tell the future. If your buddy at the water cooler is saying a recession's coming in 2025, let me be the first one to tell you he has no freaking idea. And if I ever tell you that something in the future is going to happen, I'm lying out of my ass. No one has a crystal ball, not even the legend himself, Warren Buffett, knows what's going to happen tomorrow. No one does. So you'll never be able to tell when a recession's coming, when the markets are going up and down. And if they did, there would be 100 kajillion billionaires running around because everyone could tell the future and they would just buy and sell whenever they're supposed to. Well, that doesn't happen. But for me, the point I'm making with this is that if a recession does happen next year or the next couple years, which I don't see how something wouldn't happen, but who am I to say? This is why it's important now, while times are still good, to get your money right. This is when you need to be paying off those debts, not going into more debt to take a trip. Right now is when you need to get your household finances under control, so if all hell breaks loose in 2025 or 2026, 2027, and a recession hits us and you guys start losing your jobs and everyone's not making enough money and you can't spend as much, that's when you're going to be thankful that you watched this video 2-3 years ago and you started getting your finances right. Then you can take on a recession and maybe you can even take advantage of a situation, of a recession. Meaning, whenever a recession happens, prices go lower, real estate, stocks, other investments, crypto, whatever your investment that you like to invest in is, well, you can take advantage of that by buying up stuff when it's cheaper. Again, this may be a few years out from now, or it could be 10 years out from now. We don't know. But the best part about having your household finances in order is that you can withstand a recession while also take advantage of a recession to, in return, make yourself wealthier when the recession's over. A lot of people have been doing this for hundreds of years, so why can't you?
Historically speaking, deflation means that prices are actually coming down, and the reason why prices are coming down is because people aren't spending money. The reason why people aren't spending money is because they don't have jobs and they can't afford to go out and take a trip to Hawaii or go out and buy a new Lexus or do those kind of things. They're just kind of trying to tread water, and they're not even doing that, so therefore prices are going to have to keep coming down.
It's important to remember that there's not just one consumer story.
You have the same consumer that might be out there spending on travel, going to events, whether it's concerts or sporting events, which we are seeing very, very clearly, and that's driving some of these travel trends. And they're doing it in a way that's really strategic. At the same time, that same strategic consumer might be walking into a store and really thinking carefully about how they're spending, looking for the best promotion, the best discount. So it's not one story for the consumer. And I think that's really important because it creates a lot of complications in the narrative, because you have consumers looking for discounts, you have consumers looking for promotions, and you have consumers that want to make their dollars work the best they can in the way that works for them.
Great point. She said it perfectly. My wife and I still take trips, but that's because we watch our spending 365 days a year. Now, we overspend some months just like everyone else. It happens. But we generally, our conscious mind, every time we're spending money, we're telling ourselves, is this the right move? Are we overspending here? My wife and I also negotiate all the time. All the time. I'm always the guy, I'll ask for discounts. We just bought a mattress for my daughter. I asked for additional discount because we took the floor model mattress. Got an additional discount. I'm a very frugal individual, and I'm always looking for a way to save the extra dollar. I'm probably not overboard with it. I'm not the coupon clipper or anything like that. But on bigger purchases, I definitely take my extra time to try and figure out ways to save money. Because over time, when you do that over and over and over again, you do start to see the difference. And then that extra money you saved can go towards a trip, or however you want to put it.
Financial experts say the key to affording a vacation is to plan ahead. Advisors say the first...
So true. Now, before they get into this, I want to say one thing. Something new my wife and I have started that I'm really, really liking is used to we would have just like one big cash account. And that whenever we would need like a big purchase or something, we would just pull that cash out of there. Our emergency fund was mixed in it with everything. I just knew to keep that balance at a certain amount, and it was always way more over the emergency fund for what we needed. And then I also just like keeping extra cash on hand for whenever I need it. I just like it. Some people say I'm losing money from that. I don't give a shit. I don't care. I like having extra cash sitting on the sidelines for whatever I need it, whenever I need it. Now, what we've been starting to do different here recently is I opened up another account, and I have money that gets directly pulled out of my personal checking account, and it gets deposited into this new savings account. It's a high yield savings account, and I put it in this account, and every month I put a certain amount of money that goes into this account, and I let it sit. And that money sits there, and what it does is that account, that new account I opened, is strictly our travel account. That's what that money is used for. So once that money builds up to, let's say, $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is, I can feel happy knowing that money was set aside. Because usually, the reason I did this is mentally I was having a problem pulling $10,000 out of my cash account to go spend it on a trip. To where now I know that money is associated with travel, so mentally this helps me better to know that money, that cash sitting in that account is strictly for travel, and that's it. So if I have $20,000 sitting in that account, I can go feel great spending $20,000 on a very, very nice, expensive trip because I put the money aside and I planned accordingly. That's something new my wife and I have been doing, and I really like it because it's not going to make me feel as bad knowing that money already has an assignment. That money's assignment is to fund our travel. So we're trying it out, and so far I'm really liking it because as that account builds up, I'm like, hey babe, let's take this trip. We got the money sitting aside here waiting for us. Instead of before I was like, oh, I don't really want to put it out of the cash account. It's where it already has a name. It already has an assignment. Try it out. It feels a lot better.
Step is figuring out what you want to spend and to set a budget for the trip.
This is our allowance for food, and this is our allowance for trips or activities. So you can kind of make sure your behavior is consistent with your values. Because money on trips can feel like monopoly money. I had a client I worked with who decided they were going to stay in an Airbnb and they were going to cook all of their food. So they were going to save on food and they were going to splurge on this boat trip they were really excited about. And it felt like a compromise.
The next step after establishing a budget would be making a plan to save.
You can start small and daily. Maybe you're going to set aside a little bit of money each day or each paycheck to this dream vacation. And it can be helpful to have kind of a calculation set up.
On top of setting aside the money, you can also find small ways to save on costs to make the most of your trip.
There are plenty of ways to save. You can have fun on a budget. You can use your frequent flyer miles or credit card points. You could be open-minded about when and where you go. Kind of zig when others zag. Maybe.
I like that a lot. That's something my wife and I do when we're on vacation. Like, we know, like, we have this money to spend, and we do enjoy ourselves a little more than we would in our everyday lives. We go out to eat a little more. We maybe buy oysters, when we usually wouldn't buy oysters on a typical night out if we're going to a nicer restaurant, like stuff like that. We'd buy a little bit more of an expensive cocktail to where usually we wouldn't buy an expensive cocktail if we were just going out to eat for a random Thursday night or whatever it would be. So I think that's a very great tip if you are traveling to help kind of with those savings a little bit is, even you're going to spend a little bit more money, but there are ways to kind of save a little bit while you are on that trip.
Travel in the off season or the shoulder season, or drive instead of fly, or travel midweek instead of on the weekend. If you can let the deal dictate the destination, that can really help you out. Flexibility is key.
There's times when you just have to be realistic. If you financially can't swing a vacation, can you get creative? Can you find a way to take a break from your life or mimic a vacation without the big expense?
Maybe even do a staycation. I think that's an underrated option. This idea of playing tourist in your local area. So there's a way to have fun without busting the budget.
Nearly half of Americans said they plan to skip their summer vacation, with 65% of them saying affordability was the main issue.
I kind of worry about both of those extremes. You have the people that are paying 20 or 25 or 30% extra to go on vacation, which is not great. But then you also have a lot of people skipping the trip entirely, which may be regrettable later on.
There's a ratio between the money being spent and the amount of time of your trip, and only you can decide if that experience, the memories of the 5-day vacation, is valuable enough to commit to having to worry about paying it off for months in the future.
Yeah, I think there is a different dynamic there with choosing to go on the trip versus choosing to not go on the trip and missing out on those memories. Travel is one of the best things I think all of us can do in this lifetime. And I always say, that's something I've very, very much hold near and dear to my heart, are those memories I have with my wife and then also with my kids when we go on family vacations, is those memories we get together. There have been times where we've chosen not to take vacations when we could have because we chose to save the money. So I do think there is a happy medium. I think first and foremost, you need to get your finances in check. You need to take care of your household finances. Get that in order, start paying off your high interest debt, and then maybe every time you pay off a high interest debt or any sort of debt, like let's say you got a car note, right? And you have $10,000 left on the car loan. If you can pay that sucker off as fast as you can, celebrate by paying off your car and having a paid off car by taking a trip, a small trip. Doesn't have to be over to Europe or Hawaii or whatever it may be. Take something, right up down the road. Go to a different city near in your state that you live in, or whatever. Whatever you can think of that's relatively affordable. There's ways that you can enjoy travel without having to spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000. It's just, these are things to think about as you're taking control of your finances. There are ways to enjoy yourself. Go on a hike at a local trail, that's close to home, and get a tent and camp out there for the overnight. There's just different things and different ways you can enjoy yourself and your family can without breaking the bank as you're trying to get ahead financially, which, as we all know, is tough right now given the times that we're living in and how expensive everything is. So while times are good, start taking control of your finances. Start getting ahead. Pay off debt, pull back spending, and work on increasing your income. Those three main steps. If you can follow that, you will be solid, my friends. You will. Trust me. So with that, we're going to end it on this one. Let me know your thoughts on that, because travel is something that is near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love traveling. So I'm curious on what all your all's thoughts are about this. I know some of you are going to disagree with me, and that's totally fine. But with that, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I guess that's all I got. Until next video, you all take care. Cheers.